Billionaire betrayed his secretary. 7 years later, her son punched his father at his wedding. A powerful story of love, heartbreak, and fate. Let's begin with love. 7 years ago, the pregnancy test burned like fire in Iman Saldana's trembling hands as she stood outside Jeremy Breyer's corner office, knowing that the next 5 minutes would either change their lives forever or destroy everything she'd ever dreamed of. She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times during sleepless nights, imagining his smile, his arms wrapping around her, his deep voice whispering that they would face this together. But now, standing before the imposing mahogany door with its gleaming brass nameplate reading Jeremy Breyer's Chief Executive Officer, doubt crept through her chest like ice water. Their relationship had been a secret for 18 months. Stolen kisses in empty conference rooms, weekend getaways to his cabin in the mountains, whispered conversations about a future that seemed as fragile as morning mist. Jeremy had been clear from the beginning. His position as CEO of Breyer's Industries meant they had to be discreet. His father Camden would never approve of his son dating the secretary, regardless of how intelligent, beautiful, or devoted she was. Iman understood. She had worked her way up from the mailroom, earning her position through sheer determination and countless overtime hours. She knew how the corporate world worked, how whispers could destroy careers, how a black woman from the wrong side of town would always be seen as reaching above her station. But Jeremy had made her believe that love could overcome all of that. Now, with proof of their love growing inside her, she prayed he would prove her faith hadn't been misplaced. Taking a deep breath that tasted of courage and terror, she knocked softly on the door. "Come in." His voice carried its usual authority, the tone that commanded boardrooms and bent competitors to his will. Iman stepped inside, her heart hammering against her ribs. Jeremy sat behind his massive desk, immaculate in his charcoal suit, his dark hair perfectly styled, his green eyes focused on the financial reports spread before him. The Manhattan skyline stretched endlessly beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, a testament to the empire his family had built over 3 generations. He looked up and smiled, that devastating smile that had first caught her attention during her interview 2 years ago. "Close the door, beautiful. I've been thinking about you all morning." The endearment that usually made her knees weak now felt like a lifeline. She closed the door with shaking fingers and approached his desk, the pregnancy test hidden in her closed fist. "Jeremy, I need to tell you something." Her voice came out smaller than intended, barely above a whisper. His expression shifted, business instincts sharpening as he detected the tremor in her tone. He set down his pen and leaned back in his leather chair, giving her his full attention. "What's wrong? You look pale." This was it, the moment that would define their future. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them like a bomb waiting to explode. Jeremy's face went completely still, all warmth draining from his features until he looked like a stranger. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, each one cutting deeper into Iman's heart. When he finally spoke, his voice was ice. "What did you just say?" "I'm pregnant, Jeremy. We're going to have a baby." She placed the test on his desk with trembling fingers, the plus sign clearly visible through the small window. Jeremy stared at the test as if it were a venomous snake, then slowly raised his eyes to meet hers. The man who had whispered sweet promises in her ear, who had traced her face with gentle fingers and sworn he loved her more than life itself, was gone. In his place sat a cold, calculating stranger. "How convenient!" His laugh was harsh, devoid of any humor. "The poor secretary gets herself knocked up by the rich boss. What a fucking cliché." The crude words hit her like physical blows. "Jeremy, what are you saying? This is our baby, our..." He stood abruptly, his chair rolling back against the window. "There is no our, Iman. There never was. Did you really think I was going to marry you? Take you home to meet my father? Introduce you at charity galas as Mrs. Jeremy Briars? Each question was a dagger to her heart. But you said you loved me. You said, I said what I needed to say to get you into my bed. His green eyes were arctic, without a trace of the warmth she had fallen in love with. You were a good fuck, I'll give you that. But if you think I'm stupid enough to let some gold-digging secretary trap me with a pregnancy, you're more naive than I thought. The room spun around her. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be the man who had held her through thunderstorms, who had bought her favorite flowers just because it was Tuesday, who had traced patterns on her bare shoulder while telling her about his dreams for the future. Jeremy, please, just listen to me. I never wanted to trap you. I love you. This baby is not my responsibility. He pressed a button on his phone. Security to my office, immediately. What are you doing? Panic clawed at her throat. What I should have done months ago. You're fired, Iman. Pack your desk and get out of my building. If you try to contact me again, I'll have you arrested for harassment. The office door burst open and 2 security guards entered, their faces professionally blank. Behind them hovered Jeremy's assistant, her eyes wide with curiosity and barely concealed excitement at the unfolding drama. Ms. Saldana is no longer employed here, Jeremy said, his voice carrying the absolute authority of his position. Please escort her out. No, wait! Iman stepped toward his desk, desperate to reach the man she knew was still somewhere inside this cold stranger. Jeremy, I'm begging you, think about what you're doing. This is your child. He didn't even look at her. I don't know what you're talking about. I've never had any kind of personal relationship with this woman. If she's pregnant, she needs to figure out who the real father is. The lie was so brazen, so completely devastating, that for a moment, Iman couldn't breathe. Around them, she could hear whispers from the assistants and junior executives who had gathered in the outer office, drawn by the commotion. Tomorrow, this would be office gossip. By next week, it would be a cautionary tale about secretaries who reached too high. Ma'am, please come with us. One of the guards stepped forward, not unkindly, but with firm resolve. Iman looked at Jeremy one last time, searching his face for any crack in the mask, any sign that the man she loved was still there. But his expression remained carved from stone, his eyes focused on his computer screen, as if she had already ceased to exist. With what remained of her dignity, she straightened her shoulders and walked toward the door. The gathered employees scattered like startled birds, unable to meet her eyes. She could feel their stares burning into her back, could practically hear their thoughts. How pathetic! How could she think someone like Jeremy Briars would want someone like her? At the elevator, she turned back one final time. Through the glass walls of his office, she could see Jeremy still sitting at his desk, working as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just destroyed 2 lives with his cruelty. The elevator doors closed and Iman Saldana began her descent, not just to the ground floor, but into a future she would have to face alone. In her purse, the pregnancy test remained, a small plastic witness to the love that had been real, even if only for her. And growing inside her was a piece of Jeremy Briars that he could deny, but that would always, always be part of him. She had loved a man who didn't exist. But the baby she carried was real, and that child would know love, even if their father never would. Chapter 2. 7 years later. The alarm clock's shrill cry pierced through Iman's dreams at 4:30 in the morning, dragging her from the only peace she knew, those precious few hours when she could forget that her life had become a relentless battle for survival. She silenced the alarm quickly, not wanting to wake Ben, and slipped from the narrow bed they shared in their 1-bedroom apartment. The floorboards creaked under her feet, a symphony of poverty that had become the soundtrack to their lives. Through the thin walls, she could hear Mrs. Chen arguing with her husband in rapid Mandarin, the Hendersons' baby crying, and the distant thrum of traffic already building on the highway that bordered their rundown complex. This wasn't the life she had planned, but it was the life she had built from ashes. Iman moved silently through their tiny kitchen, careful not to wake her son. The coffee maker was ancient, a thrift store find that took forever to brew but was all she could afford. While she waited, she studied the bills scattered across their small table like fallen leaves. Rent, utilities, groceries, Ben's school supplies, the numbers never seemed to add up right, no matter how many times she shuffled them around. At 5:15, she kissed Ben's forehead gently and left for her first job of the day. The city was beautiful at dawn, she had discovered. Before the heat and humidity of summer could settle in, before the streets filled with traffic and frustration, there was a moment when everything felt possible. She walked 8 blocks to the office building where she cleaned offices for executives who earned more in a month than she made in a year. Her supervisor, Mrs. Rodriguez, was already there, her kind face creased with concern. "Mija, you look tired. Are you eating enough?" "I'm fine, Mrs. Rodriguez." The lie came easily now, as natural as breathing. Iman had learned to wear survival like armor, to smile when her heart was breaking, to stand tall when everything inside her wanted to collapse. The work was hard but honest. She scrubbed toilets, emptied trash cans, and vacuumed carpets in offices that looked remarkably similar to the one where her life had imploded 7 years ago. Sometimes, when she was alone in a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows and a mahogany desk, the memories would creep in like unwelcome ghosts. But she had learned to push them down, to focus on the task at hand. By 9 o'clock, she was rushing to her second job at Riverside Diner, where she waited tables during the breakfast and lunch rush. The work was exhausting, but the tips were better than the office cleaning, and sometimes customers left behind newspapers that she could take home to Ben. "Order up!" Jimmy the cook slid 2 plates across the pass. "Table 6 is asking for extra syrup again." Iman smiled and grabbed the syrup, weaving between tables filled with construction workers, office employees, and retirees who made their coffee last for hours. She had learned to read people quickly, who would tip well, who would complain, who just needed someone to listen for a moment. At table 6 sat Mr. Washington, an elderly man who came in every Tuesday and Thursday. He always ordered the same thing: 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, and black coffee, and he always asked about Ben. "How's that boy of yours doing in school?" he asked as she refilled his coffee. "He's doing wonderful. Made honor roll again." Pride filled her voice. Despite everything, the cramped apartment, the financial struggles, the nights when she went to bed hungry so he could have seconds, Ben was thriving. He was smart, curious, and had a sense of justice that sometimes worried her. "You're raising a good boy," Mr. Washington said, leaving a $5 tip on a $7 meal. "Don't you ever forget that." By 2:30, Iman was at her third job, stocking shelves at Metro Grocery. Her feet ached, her back protested, but she kept moving. Every hour worked was another step toward security, another small victory against the poverty that threatened to swallow them whole. The grocery store manager, Derek, was young and eager, the kind of boss who tried to be everyone's friend. "Iman, I've got good news. Corporate approved your request for more hours. You can start working Sunday mornings too." More hours meant more money, but it also meant less time with Ben, the eternal trade-off of single motherhood, time for money, presence for provisions. "Thank you, Derek. I appreciate it." By 6 o'clock, she was finally heading home, her body exhausted but her spirit intact. The evening air was thick with the promise of summer storms, and she hurried through the familiar streets of her neighborhood. It wasn't safe after dark, but it was home. She climbed the 3 flights of stairs to their apartment, her keys jingling softly as she unlocked the door. The smell of something burning hit her immediately. "Ben? I'm in the kitchen, Mama." His voice carried the slight panic of a 7-year-old who had tried to cook and failed. She found him standing over their ancient stove, a pot of what had once been macaroni and cheese, now charred beyond recognition. His dark hair, so much like hers, was messy, and his school clothes were splattered with orange cheese sauce. "I wanted to surprise you," he said, his bottom lip trembling slightly. "I know you're always tired when you get home, so I thought—" Iman's heart broke and mended in the same moment. She knelt down to his level, pulling him into her arms. He smelled like childhood and burnt cheese and everything precious in her world. "Oh, baby, that was so thoughtful of you. But remember what I said about using the stove when I'm not home?" "I know, but I'm 7 now. I wanted to help." His brown eyes, Jeremy's eyes, though she tried never to think about that, were earnest and determined. "You do help, sweetheart. More than you know." She kissed his forehead, tasting the salt of his skin and the sweetness of innocence. "How about we clean this up and make some sandwiches instead?" As they worked together in their tiny kitchen, Ben chattering about his day at school, Iman felt the familiar ache in her chest. This beautiful, brilliant child deserved so much more than she could give him. He deserved a father who loved him, a bigger apartment, vacations, college funds, and all the opportunities that came with financial security. But he also deserved honesty, and that was something she had never been able to give him. "Mama?" Ben's voice was quiet as they sat at their small table, sharing peanut butter sandwiches. "Why don't I have a daddy?" The question she had been dreading for years finally arrived with the casualness of a child asking about the weather. Iman's sandwich turned to dust in her mouth. "Some families are different, baby. We have each other, and that's what matters. But Tommy at school says every kid has a daddy somewhere, even if they don't live together." Ben's innocent logic was devastating. "Did my daddy die?" "No, sweetheart. Your daddy? He just wasn't ready to be a daddy." "Will he ever be ready?" The hope in his voice nearly undid her. How could she explain to a 7-year-old that his father had chosen not to love him? That Jeremy Briers lived less than 20 miles away in his mansion, attending charity galas and building his empire, completely unaware that he had a son who dreamed of him every night? "I don't know, Ben. But I do know that you are the most important thing in my world, and I love you enough for 10 daddies." Ben seemed satisfied with this answer, as children often are when presented with love as a substitute for truth. But Iman saw the questions lingering in his eyes, and she knew that her carefully constructed world of omissions was beginning to crack. Later that evening, after Ben had fallen asleep clutching his favorite book about space exploration, Iman sat in their tiny living room and allowed herself 5 minutes of weakness. 5 minutes to remember what it felt like to be loved, to dream of a different life, to wonder what Jeremy would think if he could see the remarkable child they had created. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Keisha. "Girl, did you see the news? Your ex-boss is getting married this weekend. Big society wedding, the whole thing makes me sick." Iman stared at the message until the words blurred together. Jeremy was getting married. Of course he was. To someone appropriate, someone from his world, someone who would never be accused of trying to trap him. She deleted the message without responding and checked on Ben one more time. He slept peacefully, his face relaxed in the way that only children could achieve. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new struggles, new small victories. But tonight, in the quiet darkness of their small apartment, she allowed herself to hope that somehow, someday, her love would be enough to give him the life he deserved. Outside their window, the city hummed with 8 million dreams, and Iman Saldana dared to believe that hers might still come true. Chapter 3. The Wedding Crasher. Ben Saldana had always been too smart for his own good, and Saturday morning proved no different as he watched his mother's phone light up with a text message while she stood under their tiny apartment's lukewarm shower. The message was from Aunt Keisha, not his real aunt, but the closest thing to family they had besides each other. Ben could read better than most kids his age, a skill his mother had nurtured with library books and patient evening lessons at their kitchen table. The words on the glowing screen seemed to jump out at him like a neon sign. "Today is your ex-boss's wedding. That bastard Jeremy Briers is marrying some socialite at the Plaza Hotel. I hope he chokes on his champagne." Jeremy Briers. His mother had mentioned that name in her sleep sometimes, always with tears streaming down her face. Ben had wondered who could make his strong, brave mother cry even in her dreams. His 7-year-old mind worked with the relentless logic of childhood, connecting dots that adults often missed. His mother had worked for this Jeremy person. She cried about him. She had told Ben that his daddy wasn't ready to be a daddy, and now this man was getting married at the fanciest hotel in the city. Ben's small hands trembled as he set the phone back exactly where his mother had left it. The shower was still running, which meant he had maybe 5 minutes before she noticed he was gone. He pulled on his best clothes, the navy blue pants and white shirt that Aunt Keisha had bought him for school pictures. If he was going to meet his father, he wanted to look nice. Maybe if his daddy saw how good he was, how smart and well-behaved, he might want to be his daddy after all. The Plaza Hotel wasn't far. He had seen it on their walks through the city when his mother would point out the pretty buildings and tell him stories about the people who might live there. Ben had always been good with directions, another trait his mother had proudly nurtured, and he knew exactly which bus to take. The coins from his piggy bank, money he had been saving for a birthday present for his mother, jingled in his pocket as he slipped out of their apartment building. Mrs. Chen was watering her plants on the fire escape and called out to him, but Ben was already running down the street, his heart pounding with determination and terror. The bus ride seemed to take forever. Ben sat pressed against the window, watching the city change around him as they traveled from his neighborhood of chain-link fences and corner stores to a world of gleaming towers and doormen in fancy uniforms. With each passing block, the buildings grew taller, the cars more expensive, the people more polished. The Plaza Hotel rose before him like a castle from one of his storybooks, all golden stone and arching windows. Ben had never seen anything so grand, so impossibly beautiful. Cars that cost more than his mother made in a year were lined up outside, and men in black suits were helping women in flowing dresses step onto a red carpet that led to the main entrance. This was his father's world. This was where he belonged. Ben approached the hotel with the fearless confidence that only children possess. The doorman, resplendent in his gold-braided uniform, looked down at the small boy with surprise. "Excuse me, young man. Are you here with someone?" "I'm here for the wedding," Ben said, lifting his chin with dignity that would have made his mother proud. "I'm supposed to be there." The doorman's expression softened. Perhaps he assumed Ben was a ring-bearer running late, or the son of a wedding guest. In his pressed clothes and polite manner, Ben looked exactly like the kind of child who would be welcome at such an event. "The ceremony is in the grand ballroom, son. Follow the signs." Ben walked through the hotel lobby with wide eyes, taking in the crystal chandeliers, the marble floors, the massive flower arrangements that probably cost more than his mother's monthly rent. Everywhere he looked, he saw wealth beyond his imagination, women dripping with diamonds, men in tuxedos that fit like second skins, children his own age dressed like little adults and clutching the hands of nannies. The signs to the grand ballroom were easy to follow, and as Ben got closer, he could hear the soft strains of classical music and the low murmur of hundreds of voices. His heart began to race. In just a few minutes, he would finally meet his father. The grand ballroom was the most beautiful thing Ben had ever seen. Thousands of white flowers cascaded from the ceiling, and golden chairs were arranged in perfect rows, facing an altar that looked like something from a fairy tale. The guests were seated, their faces turned expectantly toward the front of the room. And there, standing at the altar in a black tuxedo, was a man who looked exactly like Ben would look when he grew up. Jeremy Briers was tall and handsome, with dark hair and eyes that Ben recognized from his own reflection. The resemblance was unmistakable, undeniable, overwhelming. This was his father. This was the man who had made his mother cry, who had never wanted to meet him, who had chosen this moment, his wedding day, to prove that Ben didn't matter. The wedding march began to play, and the guests rose to their feet. A woman in the most beautiful white dress Ben had ever seen began walking down the aisle, her face radiant with joy. She was pretty and blonde and looked like the kind of person who belonged in this golden world. She looked like everything his mother was not. Rage filled Ben's small chest, hot and pure and righteous. His mother worked 3 jobs to feed them. She went to bed hungry so he could eat. She held him when he had nightmares and read him stories even when she was exhausted. She was the most beautiful, strongest, most wonderful person in the world, and this man, his father, had thrown her away like garbage. The bride reached the altar, and Jeremy Briers smiled down at her with a tenderness that made Ben's heart crack in two. His father was capable of love. He just hadn't wanted to love Ben or his mother. The minister began to speak, but Ben barely heard the words. His vision had narrowed to a tunnel focused on the man at the altar, the man who should have been his daddy, who should have been there for bedtime stories and scraped knees and school plays. If anyone has any reason why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace. The words rang out in the sudden silence, and Ben felt as if the universe had just given him permission. He began walking down the aisle. 300 guests turned to stare at the small boy in his carefully pressed clothes, his chin raised with determination, his brown eyes, Jeremy's eyes, blazing with purpose. Whispers rippled through the crowd like water, but Ben heard nothing except the thundering of his own heart. Jeremy saw him coming. Ben watched his father's face change from confusion to recognition, to something that might have been fear. The bride looked between them, her smile faltering as she saw the unmistakable resemblance. Ben reached the altar and stopped directly in front of Jeremy Briers, looking up at the man who had shaped his entire life through his absence. "You're my daddy," Ben said, his voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. "And you left my mama when she needed you most." Jeremy's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "I don't know what you're talking about. Security." But Ben wasn't finished. 7 years of questions, of wondering why he wasn't good enough to love, of watching his mother struggle and sacrifice, had built up inside him like a dam about to burst. "You betrayed my mother!" Ben shouted, his child's voice cutting through the ornate ballroom like a sword. "You broke her heart and you made her cry, and you never even wanted to know me." The bride stumbled backward, her bouquet falling to the marble floor. "Jeremy, what is this? Who is this child?" Ben turned to look at her, this stranger who was trying to take his father away forever. "He's my real father. His name is Jeremy Briers, and he's a liar and a coward." The gasps from the audience were audible now, a wave of shock rolling through the assembled guests. Phones were appearing, cameras clicking, social media posts being crafted in real time. This wasn't just a wedding anymore. It was a scandal. Jeremy reached for Ben's arm, but the boy was quicker, fueled by righteous anger and desperation. Ben drew back his small fist and punched Jeremy Briers as hard as he could, right in the stomach. "I will never leave you alone," Ben cried as Jeremy doubled over, more from shock than pain. "You can't pretend I don't exist anymore." Security guards were rushing forward now, but they seemed uncertain how to handle a 7-year-old boy who was clearly in distress. The bride was crying, her perfect makeup running in black streams down her cheeks. Guests were standing, reaching for their phones, whispering frantically to each other. And through it all, Jeremy Briers stared down at the small boy who had just destroyed his wedding, seeing his own face reflected back at him in miniature. "Ben! Ben!" The voice cut through the chaos like a lifeline. Ben turned to see his mother racing down the aisle, her face a mask of panic and terror. She had never looked more beautiful to him, even though she was wearing her old work clothes and her hair was disheveled from running. "Don't touch him!" Iman cried as the security guards moved toward her son. "He's just a baby!" She reached Ben and swept him into her arms, holding him protectively against her chest. Her eyes met Jeremy's across the ruined altar, and 7 years of pain and anger and love passed between them in a single glance. "Hello, Jeremy," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "I think it's time you met your son." Chapter 4. Shattered Ceremony. The silence that followed Iman's words was deafening, broken only by the soft weeping of the bride and the distant clicking of camera phones capturing the most spectacular wedding disaster in Plaza Hotel history. Jeremy Briers stood frozen at the altar, his perfect tuxedo now wrinkled from Ben's small but determined punch, staring at the woman who had haunted his dreams for 7 years. Iman looked exactly the same, yet completely different. Still beautiful, still possessing that quiet dignity that had first captured his attention, but now there was steel in her spine and fire in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Motherhood and hardship had transformed her into someone stronger, someone who would fight tigers to protect her child. Their child. The boy, Ben, pressed his face against his mother's shoulder, but his eyes never left Jeremy's face. Those eyes were like looking into a mirror, reflecting not just Jeremy's own features, but an innocence that Jeremy had lost somewhere along the path to becoming the man his father demanded he be. "This is impossible," Tallulah whispered, her perfect wedding dress now stained with tears and the crushed petals of her fallen bouquet. "Jeremy, tell me this isn't true. Tell me this child is lying." But Jeremy couldn't speak. The words stuck in his throat like shards of glass, because the truth was written all over Ben's face, in the curve of his jaw, the shape of his eyes, the determined set of his mouth that Jeremy recognized from his own childhood photographs. The wedding guests were in various states of shock and fascination. Some were already heading for the exits, unwilling to be part of whatever scandal was unfolding. Others remained glued to their seats, smartphones recording every moment for posterity and gossip. Jeremy could see tomorrow's headlines already. "Billionaire's wedding crashed by secret love child." "Security, please escort these people out," Jeremy finally managed, his CEO training kicking in. "When in crisis, take control, limit damage, protect the brand." But Ben lifted his head from his mother's shoulder, those mirror image eyes blazing with a child's sense of justice. "No, I won't go. You can't keep pretending I don't exist." "Son," Jeremy started, then stopped, the word feeling foreign on his tongue. "I'm not your son," Ben shouted, his small voice echoing through the ballroom. "Sons get to live with their daddies. Sons get birthday presents and bedtime stories and help with homework. I'm just the kid you threw away." Each word was a knife to Jeremy's chest, the absolute truth of it, delivered with the devastating honesty that only children possessed, cut through every defense he had built over the years. Iman's arms tightened protectively around Ben. "That's enough," she said quietly, but her voice carried to every corner of the silent ballroom. "We didn't come here to hurt anyone. We just—" She looked directly at Jeremy, and he saw 7 years of struggle in her face, 7 years of raising their child alone. He just wanted to meet his father. "I wanted to know why you didn't want me," Ben added, his voice smaller now, more vulnerable. "Mama says you weren't ready to be a daddy, but I thought maybe if you saw me." The innocence of it broke Jeremy's heart. This beautiful child had come here with hope, believing that if his father just met him, just saw how good he was, everything would change. Tallulah was backing away from the altar, her designer heels clicking on the marble floor. "I can't do this," she whispered. "Jeremy, I can't marry you. Not like this. Not with them here." "Tallulah, wait." But she was already running, her wedding dress trailing behind her like a white flag of surrender. Her bridesmaids followed in a flurry of silk and confusion, leaving Jeremy standing alone at the altar that had been meant to unite him with his future. The officiant, a distinguished older man who had probably performed hundreds of society weddings, cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Perhaps we should postpone." "The wedding is over," Jeremy said flatly. "Everyone can go home." But the guests were reluctant to leave, too fascinated by the drama unfolding before them. Jeremy could feel their stares, their whispered speculation, their phones still recording. His life was being dissected in real time, broadcast to the world through social media. Camden Briers, Jeremy's father, finally stepped forward from the front row. At 68, he was still imposing, his silver hair perfectly styled, his $3,000 suit immaculate. But his face was hard with disappointment and barely controlled rage. "Jeremy, what is the meaning of this?" Camden's voice could have cut glass. "Who are these people?" Jeremy looked at his father, then at Iman and Ben, then back at his father. For the first time in his life, he didn't have an answer that would satisfy Camden Briers. Ben, however, had no such hesitation. He stepped forward, small and defiant, in his carefully pressed clothes. "I'm your grandson," he announced with the matter-of-fact tone that children used when stating obvious truths. "My name is Ben Saldana, and I'm 7 years old, and I'm really good at math." Camden's face went white, then red, then white again. "This is preposterous. Jeremy, tell me you haven't been foolish enough to—" "To what?" Iman interrupted, her voice steady but dangerous. "To love someone beneath your station, to create a child with someone who wasn't born into your world of privilege?" Camden turned his cold gaze on her, the same dismissive look Jeremy had given her 7 years ago. "Young woman, I don't know what game you're playing, but this isn't a game." Iman's composure never wavered. "This is about a little boy who deserves to know his father, a little boy who asks me every night why his daddy doesn't love him." Ben pressed closer to his mother, sensing the hostility radiating from the older man. "Mama, let's go home. I don't like it here." But Jeremy finally found his voice. "Wait." The single word stopped Iman as she turned to leave. "Just wait." She looked back at him, and Jeremy saw something flicker in her eyes. Not hope, he had killed that 7 years ago, but a willingness to listen. "I need to know," Jeremy said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Is he really what, Jeremy? Really your son?" Iman's laugh was bitter. "Look at him. Look at his face, and tell me what you see." Jeremy looked, really looked. The resemblance was undeniable. It was like staring at photographs of himself as a child. Same dark hair, same brown eyes, same stubborn set to the jaw. But there was something else, something that was purely Iman, a gentleness, a warmth that Jeremy had never possessed even as a child. "He has your eyes." Tallulah's voice came from behind them. She had returned, her wedding dress now wrinkled, her makeup streaked with tears. "I always wondered why you looked so sad sometimes, Jeremy. Now I know." Jeremy turned to face his former bride. "Tallulah, I can explain." "Can you?" She approached slowly, her heels echoing in the now quiet ballroom. Most of the guests had finally left, unable to bear witness to the complete destruction of what was supposed to be the social event of the season. "Can you explain how you had a child with another woman and never told me? Can you explain how you let that little boy grow up without his father?" "I didn't know." "Yes, you did. Iman's voice cut through his lie. I told you I was pregnant. I begged you to listen. You had me escorted out by security and told everyone I was lying. The memories crashed over Jeremy like a tidal wave. He remembered that day, remembered the fear that had gripped him when Iman had placed that pregnancy test on his desk. Fear of his father's disapproval, fear of how it would look to the board of directors, fear of changing the carefully planned trajectory of his life. So he had done what he always did when faced with something that didn't fit into his world. He had destroyed it. Ben was watching this exchange with the intense focus that children brought to adult conversations they didn't fully understand but knew were important. "Mama," he whispered, "is the pretty lady mad at my daddy?" Tallulah's expression softened as she looked down at the little boy. "No, sweetheart, I'm not mad at you. You didn't do anything wrong." "But I ruined your wedding," Ben said, his lower lip trembling. "I didn't mean to make you cry." And suddenly, Tallulah was kneeling in her $1,000 wedding dress, taking Ben's small hands in her perfectly manicured ones. "Oh, honey, you didn't ruin anything. Sometimes grown-ups make promises they can't keep, and it's not your fault when things fall apart." Jeremy watched this interaction with growing amazement. Tallulah, who had been raised in the same world of privilege and expectation as he had, was showing more compassion to his son than he had managed in the past 10 minutes. "I should have known," Tallulah continued, still speaking to Ben but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Your daddy has always been afraid of loving people. It's easier for him to push them away than to risk getting hurt." She stood and turned to Jeremy, pulling off her engagement ring, a 5-carat diamond that had belonged to his grandmother. "I can't marry someone who would abandon his own child, Jeremy. I thought I knew who you were, but I was wrong." She placed the ring in his palm and closed his fingers around it. "Maybe this little boy can teach you how to love. God knows I tried and failed." With that, she gathered up her train and walked away, her head held high despite the devastation of her wedding day. Jeremy stood holding the ring, feeling its weight like an accusation. Around him, the ballroom was nearly empty now, except for hotel staff who were beginning the process of cleaning up the wreckage of his wedding. Flowers were wilting, chairs were overturned, and the cake, a 7-tier masterpiece that had cost more than most people made in a month, sat untouched. Camden stepped forward, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. "Fix this," he hissed to Jeremy. "Whatever it takes, fix this. Pay them off, make them sign agreements, but get them out of our lives before they destroy everything we've built." "Dad, no." Camden's voice was final. "You've already made one mistake 7 years ago. Don't compound it by making another one now. Some people are not our kind, Jeremy. They never will be." He turned on his heel and strode away, leaving Jeremy alone with Iman and Ben in the ruins of what was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. The silence stretched between them, heavy with 7 years of hurt and regret and love that had been buried but never truly died. Ben broke it first. "Are you really my daddy?" Jeremy looked down into those familiar eyes and felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been frozen for so long he'd forgotten it existed. "Yes," he whispered. "Yes, I am." It was the first honest thing he had said all day. Chapter 5. The Investigation. 3 sleepless nights after his wedding day disaster, Jeremy Briers sat in his corner office at 2 in the morning, surrounded by the ghosts of decisions that had shaped his entire adult life. The city sparkled beyond his floor-to-ceiling windows, but Jeremy saw none of its beauty. His desk was littered with newspapers and printouts from gossip websites, each one featuring increasingly sensational headlines about his destroyed wedding. Billionaire's secret love child ruins, society wedding. Plaza Hotel drama, CEO's past comes back to haunt him. Wedding crasher, 7-year-old exposes Billionaire's lies, but it was the photographs that haunted him most. Picture after picture of Ben's face, that small, determined expression as he stood at the altar delivering truths that Jeremy had spent years trying to bury. In every image, the resemblance was undeniable. Looking at Ben was like looking at his own childhood photographs, if his childhood photographs had ever shown such courage. Jeremy's phone buzzed constantly with calls from board members, investors and reporters, but he ignored them all. There was only one call that mattered, and he had been trying to work up the courage to make it for 3 days. Finally, he picked up his private line and dialed a number he hadn't used in 7 years. "Dr. Morrison, it's Jeremy Briers. I need a favor." Dr. Morrison had been the Briers family physician for 30 years, a man who understood discretion and the delicate nature of wealthy families' secrets. "Jeremy, I heard about the wedding. I'm sorry. I need a DNA test, quietly." There was a pause. "I see. Do you have samples?" Jeremy's hand moved to the small evidence bag on his desk. During the chaos at the plaza, Ben had left behind a small thread from his jacket caught on the altar's microphone stand. Jeremy had pocketed it without thinking, some instinct telling him he might need proof of what his heart already knew. "Yes. Can you compare it to my DNA on file from my last physical?" "Of course. This is about the boy." Jeremy closed his eyes. "His name is Ben. Ben Saldana. And I think he might be my son. I'll have results for you by tomorrow evening. Jeremy? Yes? Whatever the results show, you know what you need to do." The line went dead, leaving Jeremy alone with his conscience and the weight of 7 years of cowardice. The next day dragged by like a prison sentence. Jeremy sat through board meetings without hearing a word, signed documents without reading them, and fielded increasingly angry calls from his father about damage control and protecting the family name. "The board is getting nervous," River Hayes, his business partner and closest friend, said during their afternoon meeting. River was one of the few people Jeremy trusted completely, a man who had stood by him through every corporate battle and personal crisis. "Stock prices are down 3 points since the wedding. Investors are asking questions." "Let them ask." River studied Jeremy's face with concern. "You look like hell. Have you slept at all since Saturday?" "How can I sleep?" Jeremy leaned back in his chair, feeling older than his 42 years. "River, I think I made the biggest mistake of my life 7 years ago." "You mean Iman Saldana?" Jeremy nodded. They had been friends long enough that River knew about the affair, though Jeremy had never told him about the pregnancy. "She told me she was pregnant. I didn't believe her. I thought she was trying to trap me. And now? Now I think I was the one who was trapped. Trapped by my own fear and my father's expectations and this goddamn need to protect the precious Briar's reputation." Jeremy's voice was bitter. "Do you know what that little boy said to me? He said I threw him away like garbage, and he was right." River was quiet for a long moment. "What are you going to do?" Before Jeremy could answer, his secretary's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Briers, Dr. Morrison is here to see you." Jeremy's heart stopped. "Send him in." Dr. Morrison entered carrying a manila envelope that might as well have contained Jeremy's entire future. He was a distinguished man in his 70s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the bearing of someone who had delivered both wonderful and terrible news to families for decades. "Gentlemen," Dr. Morrison nodded to River, then looked directly at Jeremy. "Should I wait until you're alone?" "River can hear this. He's family." Dr. Morrison opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "The DNA test results are conclusive. The probability of paternity is 99.98%. Congratulations, Jeremy. You have a son." The words hit Jeremy like a physical blow. Even though he had known, even though the evidence was written all over Ben's face, hearing it confirmed felt like the world shifting on its axis. "My God," River whispered. "Jeremy, you have a 7-year-old son." Jeremy took the paper with trembling hands, staring at the scientific proof of what his heart had been screaming at him for 3 days, numbers and percentages that added up to one devastating truth: he had abandoned his own child. "There's something else, Doctor," Morrison said gently. "I took the liberty of researching the boy's medical history. He's had several emergency room visits in the past year: pneumonia, a broken wrist, what appears to be chronic malnutrition." "Malnutrition?" Jeremy's voice was sharp. "His growth charts suggest he's not getting adequate nutrition. It's not severe, but it's consistent with a family struggling financially." Dr. Morrison's tone remained professional, but Jeremy caught the implied criticism. "Children from low-income families often—" "He's not from a low-income family," Jeremy interrupted. "He's my son. He's a Briars." The words hung in the air, carrying a weight that Jeremy was only beginning to understand. This wasn't just about acknowledging paternity. It was about accepting responsibility for 7 years of neglect. Dr. Morrison left, taking the envelope, but leaving Jeremy with the burden of truth. River poured 2 glasses of bourbon from the bar cart in Jeremy's office, something they had done countless times over the years to celebrate victories or commiserate over defeats. This felt like both. "So what now?" River asked, settling into the leather chair across from Jeremy's desk. "I don't know." Jeremy stared into his glass. "How do you apologize for 7 years? How do you explain to a child that you abandoned him, not because you didn't love him, but because you were too much of a coward to love him?" "You start by trying." Jeremy's phone rang. The caller ID showed his father's number, and Jeremy knew he couldn't avoid this conversation any longer. "Jeremy." Camden's voice was ice cold. "I assume you've gotten the DNA results by now." "How did you—" "I've been protecting this family's interests since before you were born. Did you really think I wouldn't know about Dr. Morrison's visit?" Camden's tone was dangerous. "Now listen carefully. I've spoken to our legal team. We can make this go away quietly. A generous settlement, non-disclosure agreements, maybe relocate them to another city. The mother seems like a reasonable woman. Her name is Iman. I don't care what her name is. I care about protecting what we've built. This scandal has already cost us millions in stock value. If we don't contain it—" "What if I don't want to contain it?" Jeremy's voice was quiet, but River heard the steel underneath. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "Excuse me," Camden's voice was deadly. "What if I want to be his father? What if I want to try to undo the damage I've done?" "Then you're a fool." Camden's words were brutal. "That woman comes from nothing, Jeremy. Her son will never be one of us. You bring them into our world, and you'll destroy everything your grandfather and I built. Maybe it's time someone destroyed it." Jeremy hung up before his father could respond, his hands shaking with a combination of terror and liberation. He had just declared war on everything he had been raised to believe, everything that had shaped his adult life. River whistled low. "You just burned the bridge to your father. Good. Maybe it was time." Jeremy stood and walked to his window, looking out at the city where somewhere in a small apartment, his son was probably doing homework or playing with toys that Jeremy could have bought 1,000 times over. "River, I need you to find out everything about Iman and Ben. Where they live, where he goes to school, what they need. Are you sure about this? Once you start down this path, there's no going back." Jeremy thought about Ben's face at the altar, the way he had looked up at Jeremy with such hope and hurt and defiant courage. He thought about Iman, holding their son protectively while facing down a ballroom full of strangers. He thought about 7 years of bedtime stories he had never read, birthdays he had never celebrated, scraped knees he had never kissed better. "I'm sure. Find them, River. It's time I met my son properly." Outside his window, the city lights twinkled like stars, and for the first time in 7 years, Jeremy Briers felt something that might have been hope. Chapter 6. Pride and Rejection. The knock on Iman's apartment door at 7 o'clock on a Thursday evening was soft but persistent, carrying with it the weight of inevitability she had been dreading for 2 weeks since the Plaza Hotel disaster. She knew who it was before she looked through the peephole. Something in her chest, maybe her heart, maybe just old wounds reopening, recognized his presence like a phantom limb remembering pain. Through the distorted glass, Jeremy Briers stood in her hallway, looking completely out of place in his $1,000 suit, among the peeling paint and broken floor tiles of her building. "Mama, who's at the door?" Ben called from the tiny living room where he was sprawled on their second-hand couch, working on math homework with the focused intensity that always made her proud. "Nobody important, baby. Keep working on your problems." But Ben was too smart, had always been too observant. He appeared at her elbow, standing on tiptoe to peer through the peephole. His sharp intake of breath told her he had recognized his father too. "It's him," Ben whispered, his voice carrying equal parts excitement and fear. "It's my daddy." The word hit Iman like a physical blow. After 7 years of carefully constructed explanations about fathers who weren't ready, Ben had latched onto Jeremy's acknowledgement at the wedding with the desperate hope that only children possessed. Another knock, slightly more insistent. "I know you're in there, Iman. We need to talk." His voice was different than she remembered, quieter, less commanding. But then again, everything about her life was different now. She wasn't the naive 28-year-old secretary who had believed in fairy tales anymore. "Go back to your homework, Ben." "But Mama, now." Ben reluctantly returned to the couch, but Iman could feel his attention focused on every word. She took a deep breath and opened the door, keeping the chain lock engaged so only a sliver of her face was visible. Jeremy looked exhausted. His usually perfect hair was slightly mussed, there were dark circles under his eyes, and his tie was loosened in a way that would have horrified the Jeremy she remembered. But those eyes, those brown eyes that Ben had inherited, still had the power to make her forget how to breathe. "Hello, Iman." "What do you want, Jeremy?" He held up a manila envelope, thick with what looked like legal documents. "I want to help. I want to make things right. 7 years too late for that. I know, God, I know how this looks, but please, just let me in. Let me talk to Ben." "Talk to him?" Iman's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. "Now you want to talk to him? After you denied his existence in front of 300 people? I was wrong. I was scared and stupid and wrong, and I'm trying to fix it." Behind her, she heard Ben's pencil stop moving across his homework page. Every word of this conversation was being absorbed by ears that were too young to understand adult failures, but old enough to recognize pain. "You can't fix this with money, Jeremy. You can't write a check and make 7 years of abandonment disappear." "I'm not trying to buy you off." His voice carried a frustration that almost sounded genuine. "I'm trying to take responsibility. The DNA test confirmed what we both already knew. Ben is my son, and he deserves—" "Don't you dare tell me what my son deserves." Iman's whisper was more dangerous than any shout. "Where were you when he had pneumonia and I couldn't afford the hospital bills? Where were you when he broke his wrist falling off the playground equipment at his underfunded school? Where were you during the nights he cried because other kids made fun of him for not having a father?" Each question was a dagger, and she watched Jeremy flinch with every blow. Good. Let him hurt the way she had hurt, the way Ben had hurt. "I want to be there now," Jeremy said quietly. "For all of it. The good and the bad and everything in between. It doesn't work that way. You don't get to waltz back into our lives whenever it's convenient for you." "Mama?" Ben's small voice came from right behind her. He had abandoned any pretense of doing homework and was now standing close enough to see Jeremy through the crack in the door. "Is that really my daddy?" The hope in his voice nearly broke her resolve. This was the conversation she had been dreading, the moment when her carefully constructed world of half-truths and protective lies would crumble. "Yes, baby, that's him. Can he come in?" "I want to show him my math homework. I got all the problems right today." The innocent pride in Ben's voice was devastating. Here was her brilliant, beautiful boy, desperate for his father's approval over something as simple as elementary school arithmetic. 7 years of accomplishments and milestones that Jeremy had missed, and Ben was ready to forgive it all for a moment of attention. "I don't think that's a good idea, sweetheart." "Why not?" Ben's confusion was genuine. "If he's my daddy, why can't he come inside?" Jeremy spoke before Iman could answer. "Because I hurt your mama very badly a long time ago, Ben. She's trying to protect you." "From what?" "From me." The honesty of it surprised Iman. The Jeremy she remembered would have made excuses, would have found ways to shift blame or minimize his role in their destruction. This admission of culpability was something new. "I don't understand," Ben said, his 7-year-old mind struggling with the complexities of adult failures. "If you're sorry, can't Mama forgive you? That's what she always tells me to do when I make mistakes. Out of the mouths of babes." Iman felt tears prick at her eyes, but she forced them back. She had cried enough over Jeremy Briers to last several lifetimes. "Some mistakes are bigger than others, baby." "How big was his mistake?" Jeremy answered before she could. "The biggest mistake anyone could ever make. I had the most precious thing in the world, and I threw it away because I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid of loving you and your mama the way you deserve to be loved." Ben processed this with the serious concentration he applied to everything important. "Are you still afraid?" "Terrified," Jeremy admitted. "But I'm more afraid of losing you both forever." Iman wanted to hate how easily he said the right words, how naturally the charm flowed, even when he was supposedly being honest. But something in his voice, some quality she didn't remember from before, made her hesitate. "Please, Iman, just let me try. Let me prove that I've changed." "People don't change, Jeremy." "Not really, and I won't let you break his heart the way you broke mine." She started to close the door, but Ben's small hand stopped her. "Mama, can I just talk to him for a minute? Please." The desperate hope in her son's eyes was her undoing. Against every instinct screaming at her to protect him, she unlatched the chain and opened the door wider. Jeremy stepped into their tiny apartment, and immediately the space felt smaller, more cramped. He was too big for their world, too polished, too expensive. His suit probably cost more than she made in 6 months, and his presence was a stark reminder of the vast gulf between their lives. Ben, however, seemed oblivious to any disparity. He looked up at Jeremy with stars in his eyes, seeing only the father he had dreamed of for 7 years. "Do you want to see my room?" Ben asked. "I have a poster of the solar system, and I know all the planets in order." "I would love to see your room," Jeremy said, his voice surprisingly gentle. As they walked toward the back of the apartment, Iman heard Jeremy's sharp intake of breath. She knew what he was seeing, the single bed that she and Ben shared, the milk crates serving as a dresser, the toys that were clearly second-hand but carefully maintained. Their poverty was laid bare, impossible to hide or disguise. Ben proudly showed Jeremy his space shuttle models made from cardboard and his collection of library books about astronomy. "I want to be an astronaut when I grow up," he announced. "Mama says I'm smart enough to do anything I want." "Your mama is right," Jeremy said, and Iman was surprised by the thickness in his voice. "You are incredibly smart. Are you proud of me?" The question hung in the air like a prayer. Iman watched Jeremy's face crumble, watched 7 years of regret and pain wash over his features. "I am so proud of you, Ben, and I'm so sorry I wasn't here to tell you that every single day." Ben beamed, and in that moment, Iman saw her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. This was exactly what she had been afraid of. Ben's innocent willingness to forgive, to hope, to love unconditionally. When they returned to the living room, Jeremy reached for the envelope he had brought. "I know you don't want my money," he said to Iman, "but please, at least let me help with his medical bills, his education, whatever he needs. We don't need your charity. It's not charity, it's child support. 7 years of child support that I should have been paying all along." I said no. The firmness in her voice brooked no argument, but Jeremy pressed on anyway. "Iman, be reasonable. He deserves a father who wanted him from the beginning. Since you can't give him that, we'll manage just fine without you." "But I want to be his father now. Now isn't good enough." She walked to the door and opened it, her message clear. Jeremy looked at Ben one more time, his face full of longing and regret. "I'll be back," he said quietly. "Don't." But even as she said the word, Iman knew it was futile. Jeremy Briers had finally found something worth fighting for, and she doubted he would give up easily. After he left, Ben curled up next to her on the couch, unusually quiet. "Mama, do you think my daddy will come back?" Iman pulled her son close, breathing in the scent of his hair and the innocence that she was fighting so hard to protect. "I don't know, baby. I honestly don't know." But in her heart she feared she did know, and that terrified her more than poverty, more than struggle, more than anything else in her carefully rebuilt world. Chapter 7. The Breaking Point. The call came at 11:47 on a Tuesday morning while Iman was elbow-deep in industrial-strength cleaning solution at the Meridian office complex, her hands raw from scrubbing executive bathrooms that gleamed like mirrors, but never quite felt clean enough. "Ms. Saldana?" The voice on her cell phone was crisp, professional, tinged with the kind of controlled urgency that made her blood turn to ice. "This is Nurse Patterson from Lincoln Elementary. We need you to come to the school immediately." Ben collapsed in his classroom. The world tilted sideways. Iman's knees hit the bathroom floor, industrial cleaner soaking through her uniform pants, but she felt nothing except the roar of panic in her ears. "What do you mean collapsed? What happened? He's conscious now, but he has a high fever and he's been vomiting. We've called an ambulance. Which hospital would you prefer?" Hospital. The word that struck terror into the heart of every uninsured parent in America. The place where they would ask for insurance cards she didn't have and demand payments she couldn't make, where they would save her son's life and then financially destroy hers in the process. "I'll meet you at General Hospital," she managed, her voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. "Tell him Mama's coming. Tell him I'm on my way." She ran from that bathroom like a woman on fire, abandoning her cleaning cart, her responsibilities, probably her job. Mrs. Rodriguez called after her, but Iman couldn't stop, couldn't explain, couldn't do anything except get to her baby. The bus ride to the hospital was the longest 23 minutes of her life. She stared out the window at the city rushing by, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. Ben had been tired lately, picking at his food, complaining of headaches that she had attributed to stress from the wedding incident 2 weeks ago. How had she missed that he was really sick? Because you're working 3 jobs and you're exhausted and you can't be everything to everyone all the time, a voice in her head whispered. But the guilt was already eating her alive. What kind of mother misses her child getting seriously ill? General Hospital's emergency room was a study in controlled chaos. People clutching injuries, children crying, the omnipresent smell of disinfectant mixing with fear and pain. Iman rushed to the reception desk, her heart hammering so hard she could barely speak. My son, Ben Saldana, he was brought in by ambulance from Lincoln Elementary. Room 304, the receptionist said, without looking up from her computer. Take the elevator to the 3rd floor. Turn right. Iman ran. She ran through corridors lined with wheelchairs and gurneys, past other families dealing with their own crises, following the room numbers until she found 304. She burst through the door and stopped short. Jeremy was there. He sat beside Ben's hospital bed, holding their son's small hand in both of his, murmuring something too quiet for her to hear. Ben was awake but pale, an IV line snaking from his thin arm to a bag of fluids hanging beside the bed. He looked so small in the hospital gown, so fragile and young, that Iman's chest tightened with protective fury. "What are you doing here?" The words came out harsher than she intended, sharpened by panic and the sight of Jeremy in her space, in her crisis. Jeremy looked up, his face haggard with worry. "The school called me too. I'm listed as his father on the emergency contact form." "What? No, you're not. I had my lawyer contact the school yesterday," Jeremy said quietly, not releasing Ben's hand. "I wanted to make sure that if something happened, if you couldn't be reached, he wouldn't be alone." The presumption of it, the arrogance of making decisions about her son without consulting her, should have made her furious. But looking at Ben's face, the way he was gazing up at Jeremy like he was seeing salvation itself, she couldn't find the energy for anger. "Mama!" Ben's voice was hoarse but relieved. "You came!" "Of course I came, baby." She rushed to his other side, smoothing his hair back from his feverish forehead. "How are you feeling?" "Better now that you and Daddy are both here." "Daddy?" The word hit her like a physical blow. When had Ben started calling Jeremy that? When had this man who had denied his existence for 7 years become Daddy in her son's mind? A doctor appeared in the doorway. Dr. Sarah Kim, according to her badge, a woman about Iman's age with kind eyes and gentle hands. "Ms. Saldana, I'm glad you're here. Ben has been asking for you." "What's wrong with him?" Iman's voice was tight with fear. Dr. Kim glanced at Jeremy, then back at Iman. "I need to speak with Ben's legal guardian about his condition." "I'm his mother and legal guardian," Iman said firmly. Jeremy stepped back slightly. "I believe I'm his biological father, but Iman has full custody and medical decision-making authority." Dr. Kim nodded professionally. "Ben has pneumonia, but we caught it early. His immune system is compromised, likely due to chronic stress and insufficient nutrition. His white blood cell count is low, and he's dehydrated." Each word was a knife to Iman's heart. Insufficient nutrition. She had been skipping meals to make sure Ben had enough to eat, but apparently it hadn't been enough. She had failed him in the most basic way a mother could fail. "Will he be okay?" Jeremy's voice was tight with worry. "With proper treatment, absolutely. We'll need to keep him here for a few days for IV antibiotics and monitoring. The good news is that children are resilient, and Ben seems like a fighter." "How much will this cost?" Iman asked, the practical worry overwhelming her relief. "I don't have insurance right now and I can't—" "I'll handle it," Jeremy interrupted. "Whatever it costs, I'll take care of everything. I don't want your money." "This isn't about what you want." Jeremy's voice was firm but not unkind. "This is about our son getting the medical care he needs." Our son. There it was again, that possessive pronoun that made her want to scream. 7 years of my son, and suddenly Jeremy was claiming ownership with 2 little words. Dr. Kim cleared her throat diplomatically. "I'll give you both some time to work out the details. The important thing is that Ben gets his treatment. The financial arrangements can be sorted out later." After the doctor left, an uncomfortable silence settled over the room. Ben had dozed off, exhausted by illness and the drama of the day, leaving his parents to navigate the minefield of their complicated relationship. "How did you know?" Iman asked quietly. How did you know to come? I heard about it through my lawyer, Jeremy said carefully. After the DNA test confirmed Ben was my son, I asked him to monitor any emergency situations involving you both. Not to interfere, just to know if you needed help. You've been having us watched. I've been trying to understand how to be part of his life without overstepping boundaries. Jeremy's voice was quiet. I know I have no legal rights, no official role in his life, but when I heard he was sick, I couldn't stay away. The confession should have terrified her, but instead she felt a strange sort of relief. She had sensed someone watching them, had caught glimpses of expensive cars in their neighborhood that didn't belong, had felt eyes on her as she walked to work. You've been stalking us. I've been learning about my son. There's a difference. Is there? Jeremy finally looked at her, and she saw something in his face that she had never seen before. Complete vulnerability. Iman, I know you hate me. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, don't deserve to be in his life, but I can't stay away anymore. He's my child too. You gave up that right 7 years ago. I was 28 years old and terrified of my father and the board of directors and everything that loving you and Ben would have meant for my carefully planned life. I was a coward and an idiot, and I've regretted it every single day since. Regret doesn't give you 7 years back. No, it doesn't, but maybe it can give us a future. Ben stirred in his sleep, making a small sound of distress. Immediately, both parents moved toward him, their hands meeting as they reached to comfort him. The contact was electric, 7 years of separation collapsing in an instant. It's okay, baby, Iman whispered, smoothing his hair. We're both here, Jeremy added softly. Mama and Daddy are both here. Ben settled back into sleep, and they pulled their hands away from each other as if they had been burned. Don't, Iman whispered. Don't make him promises you can't keep. What makes you think I can't keep them? Because you're Jeremy Briers. Your world is charity galas and board meetings and people who think my son is a mistake you need to fix. How long before the novelty of playing daddy wears off? Jeremy was quiet for so long that she thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I looked him up, you know, online. There are pictures from his school's science fair where he won first place with a project about solar energy, pictures from the community center where he volunteers reading to younger kids. 7 years worth of achievements and milestones that I missed because I was too proud and too scared to admit I was wrong. He turned to look at her, and she saw tears in his eyes that she had never seen before. I've been living half a life, Iman, going through the motions of success and achievement, but feeling empty inside. Then I saw him at the wedding, saw the courage it took for a 7-year-old to stand up in front of all those people and fight for what he believed was right. And I realized that he's everything I should have been and never was. Jeremy, I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm just asking you to let me try to be the father he deserves. Before she could answer, Ben's eyes fluttered open. He looked between them, his fever-bright gaze taking in their proximity, their obvious emotional conversation. Are you fighting? He asked weakly. No, sweetheart, Iman said quickly. We're just talking. Good. I don't like it when people fight. Ben's hand found Jeremy's. Daddy, will you stay with me tonight? I don't like hospitals. Jeremy looked at Iman, asking permission with his eyes. Every instinct she had screamed at her to say no, to protect her son from the inevitable disappointment when Jeremy got bored and moved on to other interests. But Ben was looking at them both with such hope, such desperate need for the family he had always dreamed of, that she found herself nodding. If your daddy wants to stay, he can stay. Jeremy's smile was like sunrise after the longest night. I want to stay. I want to stay for everything. As the afternoon wore on, they fell into an unexpected rhythm. Iman held Ben's hand while Jeremy read to him from a book about space exploration that had materialized from somewhere. When Ben dozed, they took turns monitoring his breathing, adjusting his blankets, being present in the way that parents were supposed to be present. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. And for the first time in 7 years, Iman allowed herself to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. Evening came, and with it visiting hours end. Iman prepared to leave, but Jeremy caught her hand. "Thank you," he said simply, "for letting me stay, for letting me be here. Don't make me regret it, Jeremy. I won't. I promise you, I won't." As she walked out of the hospital into the cool night air, Iman felt something she hadn't felt in 7 years. Hope. It was dangerous and foolish and probably setting herself up for heartbreak all over again. But watching Jeremy with Ben, seeing the genuine love and regret in his eyes, she couldn't help but wonder if people really could change. If love really could be enough to overcome the past. If families really could be rebuilt from broken pieces. Chapter 8. Building Bridges. 4 months after the hospital stay, Iman found herself watching Jeremy coach Ben's little league practice and feeling her heart perform dangerous gymnastics in her chest. Jeremy was there in jeans and a team t-shirt, patiently teaching 7- and 8-year-olds how to hold a bat. The community center's dusty diamond looked nothing like manicured fields where wealthy children played, but Jeremy was there anyway, completely committed. "Miss Iman?" Sage Williams settled beside her on the bleachers with coffee. "That man is seriously committed, isn't he?" Iman accepted the coffee gratefully. "It's been 4 months. He hasn't missed a single practice, parent-teacher conference, or doctor's appointment. And you're still waiting for him to disappoint you. People don't really change, Sage. Not fundamentally. Maybe not. But people can grow. And from where I'm sitting, that man looks like he's doing some serious growing." On the field, Jeremy was kneeling beside Tyler, a shy 8-year-old who had struck out and was fighting tears. Whatever Jeremy said made Tyler nod and smile before picking up the bat again. "He's good with them," Sage observed. "Ben's not the only kid who lights up when he pays attention." That was true. Jeremy had become the father figure for half the team, many from single-parent households like Ben's. He remembered all their names, asked about schoolwork, never made anyone feel stupid. "Ben asked me something last week," Iman said quietly. "He asked if I thought Jeremy would stay forever, or if he was just visiting until he got bored." "What did you tell him?" "I told him I didn't know, because I don't." Iman watched Jeremy high-five Tyler after the boy hit a weak grounder. "Part of me wants to believe he's changed, but part of me is terrified this is just extended guilt, and one day he'll remember he's Jeremy Briers and we're not his people." Practice ended, and Ben came running over, face flushed with joy. "Mama, did you see? Coach Jeremy taught me how to steal second base." "I saw, baby. You're getting really good." Jeremy approached, expensive sneakers covered in dust, hair mussed from athletic activity. He looked younger, more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. "He's a natural athlete," Jeremy said, ruffling Ben's hair with casual affection. "Good eye, quick reflexes, takes after his mother." "Can Coach Jeremy come to dinner tonight?" Ben asked hopefully. "I want to show him my science project." This had become the pattern. Jeremy never invited himself, but made himself available for every opportunity to spend time with Ben. "Please, Mama, I made a volcano." "Okay, but we're having spaghetti from a box. Nothing fancy." "Spaghetti sounds perfect." An hour later, they crowded around Iman's small kitchen table, watching Ben's baking soda volcano erupt while he explained the chemical reaction with budding scientist enthusiasm. "So when vinegar mixes with baking soda, it makes carbon dioxide gas, and that causes the eruption." Ben's eyes were bright, just like a real volcano, except real ones have magma instead of red food coloring. That's incredible, Ben, Jeremy said, his pride unmistakable. You explained that better than my college geology professor. Really? You're going to make an amazing scientist someday. Ben beamed, and Iman felt that dangerous flutter again. This was what she'd been afraid of. Ben forming attachment to a father who might not stay, and herself remembering why she'd fallen in love with Jeremy. After dinner, while Ben did homework, Iman and Jeremy found themselves washing dishes together. It was domestic and comfortable and terrifying. "Thank you," Jeremy said quietly, "for letting me be part of this. You don't have to thank me. He's your son too." The admission slipped out before she could stop it, and Jeremy's hands stilled on the plate he was washing. "Do you mean that?" "I mean he deserves to know his father. If you're really planning to stick around." "I am. Iman, I know you don't believe me yet, but I'm not going anywhere. This," he gestured around the kitchen, "this is what I want. Not charity galas or board meetings. This is poverty, Jeremy, struggle and worry and never having enough. This is family." His voice was firm. "This is what matters." Later that evening, after Jeremy left and Ben was asleep, Iman sat thinking about the changes 4 months had brought. Jeremy had been true to his word about consistency. He showed up when he said he would, remembered important things, learned Ben's schedule and made himself available. More than that, he'd proven capable of existing in their world without trying to change it. He didn't suggest expensive solutions or try to buy Ben's affection. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Thank you for dinner." Ben's volcano was amazing, but watching him with his mother was even better. "You've raised an incredible kid, Iman." She stared at the message before typing back. "He asks about you every morning, whether you'll be at practice, whether you're coming to his school play, whether you'll still be here tomorrow. What do you tell him?" "I tell him I don't know, because I don't know how to trust this." "What would it take for you to trust this?" The question demanded an answer she wasn't ready to give. What would it take? Time, proof, some guarantee that Jeremy wouldn't wake up one day and remember he was a billionaire and they were just a complication. Instead of answering, she turned off her phone and checked on Ben one more time. He was sleeping peacefully, clutching the baseball Jeremy had given him. Not expensive or signed by famous players, just a regular ball from practice with Ben's first home run, written in Jeremy's careful handwriting. Such a small thing, such an ordinary gesture. But for a little boy who'd never had father's recognition, it was everything. Maybe Sage was right. Maybe people could grow. Maybe Jeremy really was trying to become the man Ben needed. And maybe it was time for Iman to start believing in second chances, even if it scared her more than anything else in the world. Word count. 1,200 nightstand was the baseball Jeremy had given him. Not an expensive signed ball from a famous player, just a regular baseball from practice with Ben's first home run, written on it in Jeremy's careful handwriting. Such a small thing, such an ordinary gesture. But for a little boy who had never had a father's recognition of his achievements, it was everything. Maybe Sage was right. Maybe people could grow. Maybe Jeremy really was trying to become the man Ben needed him to be. And maybe, just maybe, it was time for Iman to start believing in the possibility of second chances, even if it scared her more than anything else in the world. Chapter 9. The Apology. Christmas Eve arrived with the kind of gentle snowfall that made even the roughest neighborhoods look like greeting cards, and Iman found herself staring out her apartment window, wondering how her carefully ordered world had become so beautifully complicated. Jeremy was in her kitchen, making hot chocolate from scratch, while Ben arranged cookies on a plate with the meticulous care of a 7-year-old who wanted everything to be perfect. The domestic scene should have felt strange, intrusive, wrong. Instead, it felt like coming home. "Mama, come see," Ben called excitedly. Jeremy showed me how to make the marshmallows float in a pattern. 6 months ago, if someone had told her that Jeremy Briers would be spending Christmas Eve in her apartment, teaching her son about marshmallow arrangements, she would have laughed. Now, watching Jeremy's patient smile as Ben proudly displayed his creation, she could barely remember why she had been so afraid. "It's beautiful, baby," she said, joining them in the kitchen. "Very artistic." Jeremy says patterns are important in everything. Cooking, business, even baseball. Ben looked up at Jeremy with the hero worship that still made Iman's chest tight with equal parts joy and terror. "Is that true?" "It's true," Jeremy confirmed, handing Ben a mug of hot chocolate topped with perfectly arranged mini marshmallows. "But the most important pattern is showing up. Being there when people need you, consistently, over and over again." The words were casual, but Iman caught the look Jeremy gave her over Ben's head. In 6 months, he had shown up. Every practice, every school event, every doctor's appointment, every ordinary Tuesday evening when Ben needed help with homework. He had established a pattern of presence that was slowly, inexorably wearing down her defenses. "I have something for you both," Jeremy said quietly, reaching into the bag he had brought. "Early Christmas presents." "Jeremy, we talked about this. They're not expensive," he assured her quickly. "They're just meaningful." He pulled out 2 wrapped packages, small and identical in size. Ben tore into his immediately with the enthusiasm of childhood, while Iman opened hers more carefully. Inside was a photo in a simple silver frame, the 3 of them at Ben's school Thanksgiving play, where Ben had played a historically inaccurate but enthusiastic turkey. Jeremy had attended like any other parent, cheering from the audience, taking pictures with his phone, looking completely natural in the elementary school cafeteria, despite his $1,000 suit. But it wasn't the photo that made her breath catch. It was the inscription at the bottom, written in Jeremy's careful handwriting. "The day I learned what family really means. November 15th, our new beginning." Ben held up his identical frame, beaming. "It's us. We look like a real family." "You are a real family," Jeremy said softly. "You always were. I was just too blind to see it." The moment hung between them, weighted with 6 months of slowly rebuilt trust and 7 years of carefully guarded pain. Ben, oblivious to the adult undercurrents, was already reaching for another cookie. "Ben," Jeremy said, his voice carrying a solemnity that made both mother and son look at him with sudden attention. "Can you sit down for a minute? There's something I need to say to both of you." Ben perched on the edge of the couch, his hot chocolate clutched in both hands, eyes wide with curiosity. Iman remained standing, instinctively protective, even as her heart began to race. Jeremy looked at them both for a long moment, then slowly, deliberately, lowered himself to his knees on their worn carpet. "What are you doing?" Iman whispered. "Something I should have done 7 years ago." Jeremy's voice was steady, but she could see the emotion in his eyes. "Ben, Mama, I need to apologize to both of you. Really apologize, not just with words, but with everything I am." Ben set down his mug, suddenly serious in the way children became when they sensed something important was happening. "I made the biggest mistake a man can make," Jeremy continued, looking directly at Ben. "When your mama told me she was going to have you, I was scared. Scared of what my father would say, scared of what other people would think, scared of being responsible for another person's happiness." "Were you scared of me?" Ben asked quietly. "Nobody. Never of you. I was scared of loving you too much, of not being good enough for you, of failing you the way my own father failed me in so many ways." Jeremy's voice cracked slightly. "So I convinced myself it was better to walk away. I told myself I was protecting you from disappointment. But really, I was just protecting myself from having to be brave. Iman felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them back. She had cried enough tears over Jeremy Briers to last several lifetimes. "Mama," Jeremy continued, turning to face her, "I betrayed your trust in the cruelest way possible. You came to me with hope, with love, with our child growing inside you, and I threw it all away because I was too much of a coward to fight for what really mattered. Jeremy, please, let me finish." His hands were clasped in front of him, his expensive clothes incongruous against their second-hand furniture, his vulnerability complete and devastating. "I let you struggle alone for 7 years. I let Ben grow up without his father. I missed bedtime stories and scraped knees and Christmas mornings and 1,000 little moments that I can never get back." Ben slipped down from the couch and moved closer to Jeremy, his small face serious with understanding beyond his years. "But you're here now," Ben said simply. "Mama always says what matters is what we do next, not what we did before." Jeremy's composure cracked, and Iman saw tears slide down his cheeks. "You're so wise, Ben, just like your mama. You both deserve so much better than what I gave you." "So give us better," Ben said with the matter-of-fact logic of childhood. "Stay with us. Be my daddy for real. I want to. God, I want to more than I've ever wanted anything in my life." Jeremy looked up at Iman, his face raw with hope and fear. "But it's not just up to me. It's up to your mama too." The weight of his gaze, of Ben's expectant silence, of 6 months of slowly healed wounds and carefully rebuilt trust settled on her shoulders like a mantle. This was the moment she had been dreading and hoping for in equal measure, the moment when she would have to choose between the safety of their carefully constructed life and the terrifying possibility of letting Jeremy in completely. "I'm not asking you to marry me," Jeremy said quickly, as if reading her thoughts. "I'm not asking you to trust me with your heart again. Not yet. I'm just asking you to let me keep being Ben's father. Let me keep showing up. Let me keep proving that I've changed." "Have you changed?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "Really changed, Jeremy? Or are you just playing house until something more interesting comes along?" Jeremy's answer came without hesitation. 6 months ago, I was living in a penthouse apartment that cost more per month than most people make in a year, and I was the loneliest man in New York City. I had everything money could buy and nothing that actually mattered. Now I spend my evenings in this apartment helping Ben with homework and listening to you both talk about your day, and I've never been happier in my entire life. He gestured around their small living room with its mismatched furniture and hand-me-down decorations. "This is real, Iman. This is what I want, not the charity galas or the society pages or the approval of people who don't actually care about me. This. But what about your father, your company, your whole world?" "My world is right here." Jeremy's voice was firm. "Everything else is just noise." Ben, who had been listening to this exchange with the intense focus he applied to everything important, suddenly moved forward and wrapped his arms around Jeremy's neck. "I love you, Daddy," he whispered against Jeremy's ear. "Even when you were scared, I still loved you." Jeremy's arms came around Ben automatically, holding him close, and Iman watched her son and his father hold each other with a fierce tenderness that made her chest tight with emotion. "I love you too, Ben," Jeremy whispered back, "more than all the stars in the sky, and I promise you I will never, ever leave you again." "What about Mama?" Ben pulled back to look at Jeremy seriously. "Do you love Mama too?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Jeremy's eyes found Iman's across their son's head, and she saw everything in his gaze: love, regret, hope, determination, and a vulnerability that took her breath away. "I love your mama more than my own life," Jeremy said quietly. "I always have. I was just too afraid to admit it before." The words hit her like a physical force, 7 years of carefully constructed walls crumbling in an instant. She had known on some level that he still loved her, had seen it in the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, in the gentle way he spoke to her, in the careful distance he maintained to avoid pressuring her. But hearing him say it, seeing the absolute truth of it in his face, was something else entirely. "Jeremy," she started, then stopped, not knowing how to finish. Ben looked between them with the expectant hope of a child who believed that love could fix anything, that good intentions were enough to heal old wounds. "Are we going to be a real family now?" he asked. "Like, all together all the time?" Jeremy looked at Iman, the question reflected in his eyes. She saw 6 months of consistent presence, of small gestures and patient love, of a man who had learned to exist in their world without trying to change it. She saw the father Ben had always needed and the man she had fallen in love with before fear and pride had destroyed them both. But she also saw 7 years of struggle, of nights she had cried herself to sleep, wondering why she hadn't been enough, of carefully built independence that had taken so much strength to maintain. "I don't know," she whispered, the honest answer torn from her heart. "I want to believe we can be, but I'm still scared." Ben considered this with the seriousness he applied to difficult math problems. Then, with the decisive action that had taken him down the aisle of the Plaza Hotel 6 months ago, he grabbed both their hands and pulled them together. "Then we'll be scared together," he announced, "but we'll still be together." And in that moment, with her son's small hands linking hers to Jeremy's, with Christmas Eve snow falling gently outside their window, Iman felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in 7 years. Chapter 10. Home at last. 6 months later, on a perfect spring morning that smelled of cherry blossoms and new beginnings, Iman woke up to the sound of laughter drifting from her kitchen and realized that fear had finally, completely lost its hold on her heart. She padded barefoot down the hallway of their new apartment, not much bigger than the old one, but in a safer neighborhood with better schools, a compromise that Jeremy had suggested and she had finally accepted. Through the doorway, she could see Jeremy and Ben at the stove, both of them covered in flour, attempting what appeared to be pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. "Daddy, that one looks like a blob monster," Ben giggled, pointing at Jeremy's latest creation. "Hey, blob monsters are very underappreciated dinosaurs," Jeremy protested with mock seriousness. "This is a rare Blobosaurus rex, found only in Brooklyn kitchens on Saturday mornings. There's no such thing as a Blobosaurus rex. There is now. I just discovered it. Their easy banter, the natural way they moved around each other, the unconscious affection in every gesture. It still sometimes took her breath away. This was the family Ben had dreamed of. The family she had been too afraid to hope for. "Good morning, you two paleontologists," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "Mama, look, Jeremy's making dinosaur pancakes." "Well, he's trying to make dinosaur pancakes. Mostly, he's making abstract art." Jeremy turned to grin at her, his hair sticking up at odd angles, his t-shirt dusted with flour. "I'll have you know that abstract art is very sophisticated. These pancakes will probably be worth thousands someday." "Only if someone's desperate for breakfast," she teased, moving to kiss Ben's forehead and accept the cup of coffee Jeremy handed her without being asked. 6 months of mornings like this. 6 months of Jeremy showing up not just for the big moments, but for the ordinary ones. School mornings and grocery shopping, homework help and bedtime stories, sick days and snow days and lazy Sundays that stretched on forever. 6 months of falling in love all over again with the man Jeremy had become. "I have news," Jeremy said, his voice carrying a note that made both Iman and Ben look at him with sudden attention. "Good news or bad news?" Ben asked, the eternal question of childhood. "That depends on how you both feel about adventure." Jeremy reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. expensive paper with an embossed seal that Iman recognized from his corporate correspondence. "I've been offered a position," he continued, "Chief Executive Officer of a renewable energy startup. It's a smaller company, less money, but the work is meaningful. They're developing solar technology for low-income communities." Iman felt her chest tighten. "Where?" "Here, in Brooklyn. The headquarters are being built in the Navy Yard, about 20 minutes from Ben's school." Jeremy's eyes were bright with excitement. "I'd be working for something that actually matters, trying to make the world better instead of just making rich people richer." "What about Breyer's Industries?" she asked. "What about your father?" Jeremy's expression grew serious. "My father and I had a conversation last week, a final conversation. He made it clear that if I choose this life, choose you and Ben, I'm no longer welcome in his world or his company." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. "Jeremy, you can't give up your inheritance, your family's legacy, for us." "I'm not giving it up for you," he said quietly. "I'm giving it up for me, for the man I want to be, instead of the man I was raised to become." Ben, who had been listening to this exchange with the seriousness he applied to all important adult conversations, suddenly piped up. "Will you be happy doing the new job?" "Yes, buddy. I'll be very happy." "Then who cares what your mean grandfather thinks?" The simple logic of childhood cut through all the complicated adult concerns about money and status and family expectations. Jeremy laughed, a sound of pure joy. "You're absolutely right. Who cares what my mean grandfather thinks?" "I care," Iman said quietly. "Jeremy, I won't be responsible for you losing your family." Chapter 10. Home. At last. 8 months later, on a perfect spring morning that smelled of cherry blossoms and new beginnings, Iman woke up to the sound of laughter drifting from her kitchen and realized that fear had finally, completely lost its hold on her heart. She padded barefoot down the hallway of their new apartment, not much bigger than the old one, but in a safer neighborhood with better schools, a compromise that Jeremy had suggested and she had finally accepted. Through the doorway, she could see Jeremy and Ben at the stove, both of them covered in flour, attempting what appeared to be pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. "Daddy, that one looks like a blob monster," Ben giggled, pointing at Jeremy's latest creation. "Hey, blob monsters are very underappreciated dinosaurs," Jeremy protested with mock seriousness. "This is a rare Blobosaurus rex, found only in Brooklyn kitchens on Saturday mornings." "There's no such thing as a Blobosaurus rex." "There is now. I just discovered it. Their easy banter, the natural way they moved around each other, the unconscious affection in every gesture, it still sometimes took her breath away. This was the family Ben had dreamed of, the family she had been too afraid to hope for. "Good morning, you two paleontologists," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "Mama, look, Jeremy's making dinosaur pancakes. Well, he's trying to make dinosaur pancakes. Mostly he's making abstract art." Jeremy turned to grin at her, his hair sticking up at odd angles, his t-shirt dusted with flour. "I'll have you know that abstract art is very sophisticated. These pancakes will probably be worth thousands someday. Only if someone's desperate for breakfast," she teased, moving to kiss Ben's forehead and accept the cup of coffee Jeremy handed her without being asked. 8 months of mornings like this. 8 months of Jeremy showing up not just for the big moments, but for the ordinary ones. School mornings and grocery shopping, homework help and bedtime stories, sick days and snow days, and lazy Sundays that stretched on forever. 8 months of falling in love all over again with the man Jeremy had become. "I have news," Jeremy said, his voice carrying a note that made both Iman and Ben look at him with sudden attention. "Good news or bad news?" Ben asked, the eternal question of childhood. "That depends on how you both feel about adventure." Jeremy reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope, expensive paper with an embossed seal that Iman recognized from his corporate correspondence. "I've been offered a position," he continued, Chief Executive Officer of a renewable energy startup. It's a smaller company, less money, but the work is meaningful. They're developing solar technology for low-income communities. Iman felt her chest tighten. Where? Here, in Brooklyn. The headquarters are being built in the Navy Yard, about 20 minutes from Ben's school. Jeremy's eyes were bright with excitement. I'd be working for something that actually matters, trying to make the world better instead of just making rich people richer. What about Breyers Industries? She asked. What about your father? Jeremy's expression grew serious. My father and I had a conversation last week, a final conversation. He made it clear that if I choose this life, choose you and Ben, I'm no longer welcome in his world or his company. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Jeremy, you can't give up your inheritance, your family's legacy, for us. I'm not giving it up for you, he said quietly. I'm giving it up for me, for the man I want to be, instead of the man I was raised to become. Ben, who had been listening to this exchange with the seriousness he applied to all important adult conversations, suddenly piped up. Will you be happy doing the new job? Yes, buddy, I'll be very happy. Then who cares what your mean grandfather thinks? The simple logic of childhood cut through all the complicated adult concerns about money and status and family expectations. Jeremy laughed, a sound of pure joy. You're absolutely right. Who cares what my mean grandfather thinks? I care, Iman said quietly. Jeremy, I won't be responsible for you losing your family. You're not losing me my family, Jeremy said, moving closer to her. You're giving me my real family, the one I chose instead of the one I was born into. Before she could respond, her phone rang. The caller ID showed Keisha's number, and Iman answered without thinking. Girl, you need to turn on Channel 7 right now. Keisha's voice was breathless with excitement. What? Why? Just turn it on. Trust me. Jeremy found the remote and clicked on the small television in their living area. The morning news was on, and Iman's heart stopped as she saw the headline scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Billionaire CEO chooses love over fortune. The anchor was speaking. In a surprising turn of events, Jeremy Breyers, former CEO of Breyers Industries, has announced his resignation from the family company to pursue what he calls meaningful work in renewable energy. Sources close to the family suggest this decision is related to his relationship with Iman Saldana and their son, Ben, following the dramatic wedding incident 8 months ago that captured national attention. Oh my God, Iman whispered. But the story continued. The screen showed footage of Jeremy at a press conference she hadn't known he was giving, looking confident and determined in his best suit. I'm announcing my departure from Breyers Industries to pursue opportunities that align with my values, his televised image was saying. For too long, I've prioritized profit over people, status over substance. I'm choosing a different path, one that involves clean energy, community development, and building a world I'm proud to leave for my son. A reporter's voice called out, Mr. Breyers, is this decision related to your personal relationship? Jeremy's smile on screen was radiant. This decision is related to becoming the man I want to be, the man my family deserves. Are you planning to marry Ms. Saldana? Jeremy's expression grew more serious. That's up to her. But I hope she'll give me the chance to spend the rest of my life proving that some people really can change. The report cut back to the studio, but Iman barely heard the anchor's wrap-up. She was staring at Jeremy, who was watching her with nervous hope. You did this without telling me, she said. I needed you to know that this was my choice, not something I was doing because you asked me to. Jeremy's voice was steady, but his hands were shaking slightly. I needed you to understand that I'm choosing this life, our life, because it's what I want, not what I feel obligated to do. Ben, who had been watching this adult drama unfold, suddenly clapped his hands together. Does this mean Daddy's going to live with us forever now? The question hung in the air, the same question that had been building for 8 months of careful steps toward trust and love. Jeremy looked at Iman, everything he felt written clearly on his face. That's up to your mama, Ben. The moment stretched between them, weighted with 8 months of rebuilt trust, 7 years of pain, and a lifetime of possibility. Iman, Jeremy said softly, I know I have no right to ask this after everything I've put you through. I know I've already asked for more second chances than any man deserves, but I'm asking anyway. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, then slowly lowered himself to one knee in their flour-dusted kitchen. Iman Saldana, you are the strongest, most beautiful, most incredible woman I've ever known. You raised our son to be brave and kind and everything I hope to become. You survived 7 years of hardship with grace and dignity, and you gave me the chance to prove that love is stronger than fear. Ben gasped, his eyes wide with excitement and understanding. I'm not asking you to marry me because of Ben or because of guilt or because it's the right thing to do, Jeremy continued. I'm asking you to marry me because you are my heart, my home, my everything. Because I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life and fall asleep grateful that you chose to love me. He opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring, not the massive diamond he could have afforded, but something beautiful and timeless and perfect. Will you marry me, Iman? Will you let me be your husband and Ben's father and the luckiest man in the world? The kitchen was silent except for the sound of Ben's excited breathing and her own thundering heartbeat. 8 months of careful walls, 7 years of protective fear, a lifetime of cautious hopes, all of it crystallized into this single moment. She looked at Jeremy kneeling before her. This man who had chosen love over legacy, family over fortune, them over everything else his world had taught him to value. She looked at Ben, practically vibrating with anticipation, his face shining with the hope that his family could finally, truly be complete. She looked at their life, small and imperfect and more beautiful than any fairy tale. Yes, she whispered, then louder, with all the joy and love and hard-won faith in her heart. Yes, Jeremy. Yes, I'll marry you. Jeremy's face transformed with relief and joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Ben whooped and launched himself at both of them, creating a tangle of arms and laughter and happy tears. We're really going to be a family, Ben shouted. A real, forever family. We were always a real family, Jeremy said, holding them both close. We just needed to find our way back to each other. 3 weeks later, on a sunny Saturday afternoon in Prospect Park, surrounded by the people who truly mattered, Keisha and Sage and River and Ben's baseball team and a dozen other friends who had become their chosen family, Iman walked down a simple aisle of flower petals toward the man who had learned that love was worth more than any fortune. She wore a dress she had bought herself, simple and white and beautiful, and carried a bouquet of wildflowers that Ben had helped Jeremy pick that morning. Jeremy stood waiting in his best suit, his face radiant with joy, River beside him as best man and Ben as ring-bearer, practically bouncing with excitement. The ceremony was small and perfect, officiated by Keisha, who had gotten ordained online just for the occasion. There were no society photographers, no 6-tier cakes, no 300 guests in designer gowns. There were just vows spoken with tears of joy, promises made with full hearts, and the absolute certainty that they had finally found their way home. I promise to love you through every ordinary morning and every extraordinary dream, Jeremy said, his voice steady and sure. I promise to be the father Ben deserves and the husband you've always been worthy of. I promise to choose you every day for the rest of my life. I promise to trust this love even when it scares me, Iman replied, her voice strong despite her tears. I promise to believe in the man you've become and the family we're building together. I promise to choose forgiveness over fear, hope over hurt, and love over everything else." When they kissed, Ben cheered louder than anyone, and River had to catch him when he jumped up to hug them both before the officiant had finished speaking. Later, as they danced to music playing from someone's phone while Ben ran around with the other children, Iman looked up at her husband, and felt something settle in her chest that she had never dared name before. Peace. Complete, perfect, unshakable peace. "Regrets?" Jeremy asked softly, spinning her gently under the afternoon sun. "Only one," she said, and watched his face tighten with worry. "I regret that it took us 8 years to get here." His relief was visible, his smile brighter than the sun. "We have the rest of our lives to make up for lost time." "Yes, we do." Later that evening, in their small apartment that finally felt like home, they tucked Ben into his bed and sat with him as he fought sleep, too excited by the day's events to close his eyes. "Are you happy, Mama?" he asked drowsily. "So happy, baby. Are you?" "The happiest." Ben looked at Jeremy seriously. "Daddy, are you going to stay forever now? Really, truly forever?" "Really, truly forever," Jeremy promised. "You're stuck with me now, buddy." "Good," Ben said with satisfaction. "I love you both so much." "We love you too," they said in unison, then looked at each other and laughed. After Ben finally fell asleep, they sat on their small couch, holding hands and watching the city lights twinkle beyond their window. "So what now?" Iman asked. "Now we live," Jeremy said simply. "We wake up tomorrow and make breakfast and help Ben with homework and figure out how to be married people. We take it one day at a time and build something beautiful together. It won't always be easy. Nothing worth having ever is." Jeremy lifted their joined hands and kissed her wedding ring. "But we'll face it together. All of us." Outside their window, Brooklyn hummed with 8 million dreams and second chances, and families being born and reborn every day. Somewhere across the city, in his lonely penthouse, Camden Briars was probably raging about his son's choices. Somewhere in the Hamptons, Tallulah was probably planning her own wedding to someone more suitable. But here, in this small apartment filled with love and laughter and the promise of tomorrow, the Briars family was finally, completely, joyfully home. Ben had been right all along. Love really could fix anything. And some families, the very best ones, were worth waiting for. Peace. Complete, perfect, unshakable peace. "Regrets?" Jeremy asked softly, spinning her gently under the afternoon sun. "Only one," she said, and watched his face tighten with worry. "I regret that it took us 8 years to get here." His relief was visible, his smile brighter than the sun. "We have the rest of our lives to make up for lost time." "Yes, we do." Later that evening, in their small apartment that finally felt like home, they tucked Ben into his bed and sat with him as he fought sleep, too excited by the day's events to close his eyes. "Are you happy, Mama?" he asked drowsily. "So happy, baby. Are you?" "The happiest." Ben looked at Jeremy seriously. "Daddy, are you going to stay forever now? Really, truly forever?" "Really, truly forever," Jeremy promised. "You're stuck with me now, buddy." "Good," Ben said with satisfaction. "I love you both so much." "We love you too," they said in unison, then looked at each other and laughed. After Ben finally fell asleep, they sat on their small couch, holding hands and watching the city lights twinkle beyond their window. "So what now?" Iman asked. "Now we live," Jeremy said simply. "We wake up tomorrow and make breakfast and help Ben with homework and figure out how to be married people. We take it one day at a time and build something beautiful together. It won't always be easy. Nothing worth having ever is." Jeremy lifted their joined hands and kissed her wedding ring. "But we'll face it together. All of us." Outside their window, Brooklyn hummed with 8 million dreams and second chances, and families being born and reborn every day. Somewhere across the city, in his lonely penthouse, Camden Briars was probably raging about his son's choices. Somewhere in the Hamptons, Tallulah was probably planning her own wedding to someone more suitable. But here, in this small apartment filled with love and laughter and the promise of tomorrow, the Briars family was finally, completely, joyfully home. Ben had been right all along. Love really could fix anything. And some families, the very best ones, were worth waiting for.